Cap dick coming, 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 cap dick coming.
The history of Luke, Luke Records, and Scar Da. The rise of Uncle Luke and the birth of Miami bass. Every musical movement has a place where it begins. For jazz, it was New Orleans. For Motown, Detroit. For hip-hop, New York City. But in the American South, another sound was quietly taking shape. It was louder, faster, more bass-heavy than anything audiences had ever heard before. That sound came from Miami, Florida. At the center of it stood one man whose influence would forever change hip-hop, independent music, and even the law. His name is Luther Campbell. The world knows him as Uncle Luke. To some, he was controversial. To others, he was revolutionary. He challenged the music industry. He challenged the courts. He challenged the limits of free speech. And through it all, he built one of the most influential independent record labels in rap history, Luke Records. Years later, he would introduce a young Miami rapper whose unmistakable voice would become impossible to ignore. That rapper was Trick Daddy. The song that introduced him to the world was called Scar Da. But to understand why that record mattered, we first have to understand the man behind it all. Luther Roderick Campbell was born on December 22, 1960, in Miami, Florida. He grew up in Liberty City, a predominantly black neighborhood that faced poverty, underinvestment, and limited economic opportunities. Yet despite those challenges, Liberty City was rich with culture, creativity, and community. Music echoed through the streets from passing cars, family gatherings, neighborhood parks, and local clubs. Funk, soul, disco, reggae, and early rap all blended into the soundtrack of everyday life. Campbell was fascinated by the energy that music created. He understood something many overlooked. People weren't just listening to songs. They were gathering around them. As a teenager, he worked as a DJ and local promoter, learning how crowds reacted to different records. He paid close attention to rhythm, tempo, and the way powerful bass could transform a room. Long before he became a recording executive, Campbell had already developed an instinct for entertainment and promotion. He knew how to identify excitement and how to create it. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, hip-hop was still considered a regional movement. The genre's biggest stars came from New York. Many industry executives believed rap music would remain a short-lived trend. Few imagined that southern cities would someday become the dominant force in hip-hop. Miami was almost never mentioned. Campbell saw an opportunity. Instead of trying to imitate New York, he believed Miami deserved its own identity. It needed its own sound, its own culture, its own movement. In 1984, Campbell became involved with a rap group called 2 Live Crew. Originally formed by DJ David Mr. Mix Hobbs and rapper Fresh Kid Ice. The group's earliest recordings reflected the electro-rap influences popular on the West Coast. Campbell immediately recognized potential. He brought his business instincts, promotional skills, and relentless work ethic to the group. Rather than simply managing them, he became the driving force behind expanding their audience. He relocated the group's center of activity to Miami, where the city's nightclub scene provided fertile ground for experimentation. There, the music began to evolve. The beats became faster. The bass became deeper. The lyrics became bolder. A distinctly Miami sound was emerging. Miami audiences wanted music that could move both the dance floor and the streets. Powerful bass became the defining feature. The heavy low frequencies rattled nightclub walls and car trunks alike. Unlike traditional East Coast hip-hop, Miami bass emphasized rhythm, energy, and crowd participation. It wasn't designed for quiet listening. It was designed for movement. Campbell embraced that philosophy. Every release pushed the sound further. Every performance grew larger. Every crowd became louder. Soon, Miami bass had become more than a regional style. It was becoming a cultural movement. In 1985, Campbell made the decision that would define his career. Instead of relying on established record companies, he launched his own. It was originally called Luke Skywalker Records. At a time when major labels controlled nearly every aspect of music production and distribution, independent ownership was rare. Campbell believed artists deserved more control. By releasing music independently, he could oversee recording, manufacturing, marketing, and distribution while maintaining ownership of his catalog. The strategy carried enormous risk. Independent labels often struggled with financing, national distribution, and radio promotion. But Campbell was willing to bet on himself. His confidence would inspire countless future entrepreneurs throughout hip-hop. Years before artists openly discussed owning their masters, Luke was already building a business around that principle. Luke Skywalker Records quickly became far more than a label. It became the center of an entire musical ecosystem. The company promoted concerts, distributed records, discovered new talent, produced videos, created merchandise, and most importantly, it gave Southern artists opportunities that many major labels ignored. Campbell proved that success didn't have to come from New York or Los Angeles. It could be built from Miami, on his own terms. With every release, Luke Records strengthened the foundation of Southern hip-hop. Its influence would soon extend far beyond Florida, but national attention would arrive in an unexpected way. Not because of a hit record, not because of a Grammy, but because one of the most controversial albums in American history would place Luke Records at the center of a legal battle that would redefine artistic freedom in the United States. That battle would transform Luther Campbell from a successful record executive into one of the most important First Amendment figures in modern music history. By the mid-1980s, Miami had developed a sound unlike anything else in America. The city wasn't trying to imitate New York. It wasn't trying to sound like Los Angeles. Miami bass was its own culture. Fast tempos, thunderous 808 kick drums, heavy bass lines that shook buildings and car trunks, call and response chants, dance records designed for clubs, skating rinks, and neighborhood block parties. Luke Skywalker Records was leading the movement. Every new release expanded the label's reputation across Florida and eventually throughout the South. College campuses embraced the music. Nightclubs demanded it. Independent record stores couldn't keep it on the shelves. For many listeners, Luke's records represented freedom, celebration, and unapologetic self-expression. But not everyone welcomed the movement. The same lyrics that thrilled fans shocked critics. 2 Live Crew became famous for sexually explicit songs delivered with humor, outrageous confidence, and the unmistakable energy of Miami bass. Supporters viewed the music as satire, entertainment, and a reflection of street culture. Opponents argued it crossed the line into obscenity. Television commentators debated the group's lyrics. Religious organizations condemned their performances. Politicians criticized the records. Ironically, every controversy increased public curiosity. Sales continued to rise. The more critics attacked the music, the more people wanted to hear it. Luke understood something many executives did not. Attention, even negative attention, could become powerful marketing. In 1989, 2 Live Crew released an album that would become one of the most controversial recordings in American history. As Nasty as They Wanna Be. Commercially, it was a massive success. The album sold hundreds of thousands of copies and eventually reached platinum certification. Its popularity stretched far beyond Florida. But with success came scrutiny. Community leaders demanded government action. Law enforcement agencies began investigating the album. Few could have predicted what happened next. In 1990, a federal district court in Florida ruled that As Nasty As They Wanna Be met the legal definition of obscenity under the Miller test, making it the first commercially released album to be declared legally obscene by a U.S. court. Retailers feared prosecution. Some stores immediately removed the album from their shelves. Others refused to carry Luke Records releases altogether. Then came an extraordinary moment. Members of Two Live Crew and Luther Campbell himself were arrested after performing songs from the album at a nightclub. For performing music, the arrests sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. Artists across every genre suddenly recognized that this case was bigger than one rap group. It was becoming a national debate about artistic freedom. Many believed Campbell would simply apologize, withdraw the album, move on. Instead, he fought. Campbell refused to accept that government officials should decide what adults were allowed to hear. He invested enormous time, money, and energy into challenging the ruling. Organizations dedicated to civil liberties joined the conversation. Musicians from different genres voiced concern. Legal scholars debated whether the Constitution protected controversial artistic expression. The courtroom had become the newest stage in hip-hop. The legal battle eventually reached higher courts. The original obscenity ruling was overturned on appeal, restoring constitutional protection to the album and reinforcing First Amendment principles for artistic expression. The case became one of the defining legal moments in modern American music. Its impact reached far beyond rap. Rock musicians, comedians, authors, independent filmmakers. Every creative artist benefited from the legal precedent established during the fight. What began as a controversy surrounding one record ultimately became a landmark chapter in the history of free speech. Luke was no longer simply a record executive. He had become one of the most recognizable defenders of artistic expression in popular culture. While one legal battle dominated headlines, another unfolded behind the scenes. George Lucas, creator of the Star Wars franchise, objected to Campbell's use of the name Luke Skywalker. Lucasfilm filed a trademark infringement lawsuit, arguing that the name was too similar to the famous fictional character Luke Skywalker. Rather than continue a lengthy legal fight, Campbell reached a settlement. The solution was simple. Luke Skywalker Records became Luke Records. The shortened name quickly became iconic in its own right. The rebranding marked the beginning of a new chapter for the company. The music remained the same. The mission remained the same. Only the name had changed. Long before independent ownership became a common conversation in hip-hop, Luke was already living it. He controlled recording sessions, manufacturing, marketing, distribution, publishing, merchandising, concert promotion. He demonstrated that artists could build successful careers without depending entirely on major record companies. That philosophy inspired future generations of entrepreneurs throughout Southern hip-hop. Many of today's independent artists follow a path that Campbell helped pioneer decades earlier. His influence extended beyond music. It reshaped the business itself. As the 1990s progressed, Luke Records continued searching for new voices. Campbell never viewed himself as someone who only made records. He believed his responsibility was to discover talent, to create opportunities, to open doors, Miami was filled with young artists waiting for their chance. One of those young rappers possessed a gravelly voice unlike anyone else. His lyrics reflected the realities of Liberty City. His delivery was raw, honest, unfiltered. His name was Maurice Young. The world would soon know him as Trick Daddy. Their meeting would produce one of the defining records in Miami hip-hop history, a song called Scar Day. By the mid-1990s, Miami's hip-hop scene was changing. Luke Records had already become a Southern powerhouse, but a new generation of artists was emerging, one with a grittier sound and stories rooted in everyday survival. Among them was Maurice Samuel Young. The world would come to know him as Trick Daddy. Raised in Liberty City, Trick Daddy's life reflected many of the hardships faced by young people growing up in Miami's toughest neighborhoods. His music wasn't built around fantasy. It was shaped by lived experience. His raspy voice stood out immediately. His lyrics were blunt, emotional, and unmistakably authentic. He didn't sound like anyone else, and that uniqueness caught the attention of Luther Campbell. For years, Luke Campbell had searched Miami for undiscovered talent. He understood that every great music scene depended on new voices. According to Campbell, Trick Daddy first came to his attention after participating in a local rap competition organized by Luke. His performance impressed Campbell with its honesty, confidence, and unmistakable presence. Luke immediately recognized that Trick Daddy possessed something impossible to manufacture: credibility. Instead of copying trends from New York or Los Angeles, Trick Daddy represented Miami. Every word sounded genuine. Every verse reflected real experiences. Campbell knew audiences could hear the difference. While Luke continued developing artists, his company faced serious financial challenges. After years of rapid expansion, legal expenses, and changes within the music industry, Luke Records entered Chapter 11, bankruptcy protection. The filing allowed the company to reorganize its finances while continuing operations. For Campbell, the situation created difficult business decisions. He still believed in discovering new artists, but signing long-term recording contracts had become far more complicated, even during uncertainty. He refused to stop building the future. In 1996, Luke released the lead single from his fifth solo studio album, Uncle Luke. The song was called Scared. Unlike many of Luke's earlier party records, Scared combined humor with a narrative centered on relationships, responsibility, and the fear of unexpected fatherhood. Its unmistakable groove was built around an interpolation of Barry White's theme from Together Brothers, blending a classic soul influence with the unmistakable pulse of Miami bass. The production balanced heavy bass with a smoother musical backdrop, creating a sound that stood apart from many of Luke's earlier releases. Then came a verse that introduced listeners to someone they had never heard before: Trick Daddy. From the moment Trick Daddy's voice entered the record, listeners noticed. His delivery was rough, confident, natural. He didn't sound polished. He sounded real. That authenticity became his greatest strength. While Luke remained the established star, many listeners left the song talking about the newcomer. Sometimes one feature verse changes everything. For Trick Daddy, Scared became that moment. It was his introduction to the national hip-hop audience. Ordinarily, Campbell would have signed a promising young artist directly to Luke Records, but Chapter 11, restructuring, limited what the label could do. Rather than allowing Trick Daddy's career to stall, Luke made a decision that demonstrated his commitment to the artist over the business. He helped ensure that Trick Daddy secured a recording deal with Island Records. Instead of holding on to the opportunity, he opened the door. It proved to be one of the most important decisions in Miami hip-hop history. Released on April 2nd, 1996, Scared reached number 64 on the Billboard Hot 100, giving Luke another nationally recognized hit and introducing many listeners outside Florida to Trick Daddy's voice. Within Miami, the song became much more than a chart entry. It became a neighborhood anthem. Cars blasted it through oversized speaker systems. Nightclubs filled dance floors whenever it played. For many South Florida fans, Scared represented the bridge between two generations. Luke had opened the door. Trick Daddy was ready to walk through it. Long after its release, Scared remained one of Miami's defining records. New audiences continued discovering the song. Local DJs kept it in rotation. Its influence stretched across decades of Southern hip-hop. Years later, the record received renewed attention through an official remix featuring fellow Miami stars, including Pitbull and Trina, bringing a new generation of artists together with one of the city's foundational records. The song had become part of Miami's musical identity, not simply because of its success, but because of what it represented. One generation passing the torch to the next. Luther Campbell's legacy extends far beyond one song, far beyond one label, far beyond one legal battle. He helped create the Miami bass movement. He demonstrated that independent artists could own their music. He fought for artistic freedom in American courts. He introduced audiences to future stars. And through Luke Records, he proved that Southern hip-hop deserved a permanent place on the national stage. The blueprint he created continues to influence artists, entrepreneurs, producers, and independent record labels around the world. The story of Luke Records is ultimately a story about believing in your own vision, even when others doubt it. The story of Scared is about recognizing talent before the rest of the world does. And together, those stories became an unforgettable chapter in hip-hop history.